Hello, I am Philippe Girard, and I am a professor in the history department at McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
And I'm Janet Alluret, also a professor of history at McNeese. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS.
Bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Ceci est la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, music, literature, and history as we retrace the life of a remarkable woman. She was a lover and a nun. She was the most educated woman in Europe at her time and the first female giant of French literature.
Her name was Héloïse d'Argenteuil. Centuries after her death, she still continues to inspire people, even rock bands, outside of France. This particular song is called, of course, Héloïse, from 2002 by Frank Black and the Catholics.
Starting to rain. Once in a while, I want you. Once in a while. Help me, oh God, I'm still down to combat. They sent you far away. It took your only boy. You will get used to me. Welcome to your down here serving the breeze. Since you far away, it took your only boy. You will get used to me. Welcome to your new joy. Down here serving the breeze.
Welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks and the life of 12th century woman of letters, Héloïse d'Argenteuil. My name is Philippe Girard.
And I'm Janet Alluret. Retracing Eloise's life can be difficult at times. She lived 900 years ago, and she was controversial, so sources are few and problematic. Scholars are even debating whether all the letters attributed to her are genuine.
But here's what we know. She was born around 1092, and from the beginning, her life was marked by scandal. She was an illegitimate child, like I guess many of the ones we have portrayed in the show, and various prominent nobles are mentioned as possible fathers. Her mother was apparently a nun who was expelled from her convent for her scandalous behavior.
Abandoned by her parents, Eloise was raised in a convent, which allowed her to receive the kind of education that was a rarity for women of her time. She learned Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. In fact, 200 years before the Renaissance, her knowledge of ancient classics was rare for anyone, men or women.
And she was also firmly implanted in the popular culture of her time. She wrote songs that were very popular all over Paris, and by her late teens, she was a household name because of her songs.
By that time, she was living with her uncle in Paris.
She was illegitimate, so she had no dowry, and so her best hope was to get married off to someone willing to overlook her checkered past as the daughter of a nun and the fact that she had an empty purse.
That kind of loveless marriage was something she really wanted to avoid. Fortunately, fate came knocking at her door when she met the great love of her life, Pierre Abelard.
We'll get to him in a minute, but first let's listen to a song. I would love to play you one of the 12th century hits by Héloïse. Unfortunately, none of them has survived. So instead we'll listen to a catchy tune about a man willing to do anything for a chance to flirt with the lady of his dreams. The song is called Pour un flirt avec toi by Michel Delpech, first released in 1971.
Je ferai n'importe quoi pour un flirt avec toi. Je serai prête à tout pour un simple rendez-vous, pour un flirt avec toi. Pour un petit tour, un petit jour entre tes bras. Un petit tour au petit jour entre tes draps. Je pourrais tout quitter, quitte à faire démoder pour un flirt avec toi. Je pourrais me tanner pour un seul baiser volé, pour un flirt avec toi. Pour un petit tour, un petit jour entre tes bras. Pour un petit tour, au petit jour entre tes draps. Je ferai l'amoureux pour te câliner un peu, pour un flirt avec toi. Je ferai des folies pour arriver dans ton lit, pour un flirt avec toi. Pour un petit tour, un petit jour entre tes bras. Pour un petit tour, au petit jour entre tes draps.
Welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. I'm Janet Allured.
And I am Philippe Girard. Today we explore the life of Héloïse d'Argenteuil, a young lady of great education in 12th century Paris.
It was in 1113 that she first met Pierre Abelard, who was a professor, a theologian, a kind of intellectual rock star.
Oh yes, he was very successful with the ladies. A bit too much, in fact. At age 34, after many, many adventures, he was single and he was broke. So he moved in as a boarder in the household of Héloïse to save some money. He told her uncle that he would provide free tutoring to Héloïse in lieu of rent.
But can I guess he had other things on his mind? She was in her early 20s, very pretty, and his intellectual equal. His hope was to seduce her.
She would write her lessons on a wax tablet, which she would pass back and forth to her teacher. And soon enough, they added a few love notes in Latin. And here's one greeting that Abélard addressed to her.
To her heart's love, more sweetly scented than any spice, she who is his in heart and body, the freshness of eternal happiness.
I don't know about you, but that's typically not the way I interact with my students, at least not in Latin. But we do know of all these early love notes because Héloïse made a copy of them, and they were found 250 years later by a librarian.
Nice find. So, teaching led to a love that was purely platonic at first.
We often think of the Middle Ages as barbaric times where love consisted of pillaging a village and abducting the women. But in the 1100s, poets introduced a new ideal called courtly love, the kind of love where a gallant knight falls for a noble lady of high birth and worships her from afar.
Lancelot and Queen Guinevere?
Exactly, yes. But the relationship between Abélard and Héloïse was different from courtly love in many ways. For one thing, Héloïse was not just some damsel in distress waiting to be wooed by her Prince Charming. She was an integral part of the courtship ritual.
This was also a very intellectual kind of love, the union between two of the greatest minds of their time.
This anticipates the women who describe themselves as sapiophiles today, women who are attracted by intelligence more than looks or by money.
What also differentiated Abélard and Héloïse from the ideal of courtly love was the intensely physical nature of their relationship.
Abélard later revealed that his intellectual camaraderie with Héloïse was just an act, and that he was indulging her just so that he could get her into his bed.
Here is a relationship that didn't start on the right foot.
Well, man on man, I guess, which is a perfect segue for our next song. It's a love duet in which Alain Delon, the famous French actor, recites cheesy lines he has used to seduce 1,000 ladies before. To that, the female singer Dalida responds, "Parole, parole." These are just words. I've heard that before. I see right through you. The song is from 1972.
C'est étrange. Je ne sais pas ce qui m'arrive ce soir. Je te regarde comme pour la première fois.
Encore des mots, toujours des mots, les mêmes mots.
Je ne sais plus comment te dire.
Rien que des mots.
Mais tu es cette belle histoire d'amour que je ne cesserai jamais de
Des
lire.
mots faciles, des mots fragiles, c'était trop beau.
Tu es d'hier et de demain,
Bien trop beau.
de toujours, ma seule vérité.
Mais c'est fini, le temps des rêves. Les souvenirs se fanent aussi quand on les oublie.
Tu es comme le vent qui fait chanter les violons et emporte au loin le parfum des roses.
Caramel, bonbons et chocolat.
Par moments, je ne te comprends pas.
Merci pas pour moi, mais tu peux bien les offrir à une autre qui aime le vent et le parfum des roses. Moi, les mots tendres enrobés de douceur se posent sur ma bouche, mais jamais sur mon cœur.
Une parole encore.
Parole, parole, parole.
Écoute-moi,
Parole, parole, parole.
je t'en prie.
Parole, parole, parole.
Je te jure,
Parole, 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 parole. Parole, encore des paroles que tu sais nos mots.
voilà mon destin. Te parler comme la première fois.
Encore des mots, toujours des mots, les mêmes mots.
Comme j'aimerais que tu me comprennes,
Rien que des mots.
que tu m'écoutes au moins une fois.
Des mots magiques, des mots tactiques qui sonnent faux.
Tu es mon rêve défendu,
Oui, tellement faux.
mon seul tourment et mon unique espérance.
Rien ne t'arrête quand tu commences. Si tu savais comme j'ai envie d'un peu de silence.
Tu es pour moi sur les dunes.
Caramel, bonbons et chocolat.
Si tu n'existais pas déjà, je t'inventerais.
Merci pas pour moi, mais tu peux bien les offrir à une autre qui aime les étoiles sur les dunes. Moi, les mots tendres enrobés de douceur se posent sur ma bouche, mais jamais sur mon cœur.
Encore un mot, juste une parole.
Parole, parole, parole.
Écoute-moi,
Parole, parole, parole.
je t'en prie,
Parole, parole, parole.
je te jure.
Parole, 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 parole. Parole, encore des paroles. Que tu sais mon moi.
Que tu es belle,
Parole, parole, parole.
que tu es belle,
Parole, parole, parole.
que tu es belle,
Parole, parole, parole.
que tu es belle.
Parole, 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 encore des paroles que tu sais mon
If you're just joining us, you are listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. I'm Janet Allured, here with my colleague in the History Department, Tab McNeese, Philippe Girard.
On today's show, we are discussing Héloïse, a young woman of great education whose life was turned upside down when she met her teacher, Abélard, in the year 1113.
Initially, theirs was a teacher-student relationship, then a platonic relationship, then a physical one.
And a pretty rough physical relationship, I might add. Here's Abélard reminiscing many years later about what they were doing. Quote, "When you objected to sex and resisted with all your might and tried to dissuade me from it, I frequently forced your consent, for after all you were weaker, through threats and through blows."
There's something very wrong about all of this, and scholars have been debating that passage ever since. Was it rape, or at the very least, some sadomasochistic relationship?
Héloïse insisted that their relationship was always consensual, so maybe Abélard made up the stories of abuse after the fact to deny the fact that he had ever loved her.
At any rate, Eloise's uncle eventually figured out what was going on and kicked Abelard out of the house.
That didn't stop the relationship. Abélard would sneak back into the house in the middle of the night, and the uncle even caught them in the act.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. Adding to the scandal was the fact that Eloise was now pregnant.
And so Abélard had her kidnapped and sent to a barrack where his brother was stationed. And this is where, in 1116, Héloïse gave birth to their son, whom they named Astrolabe.
Eloise was never a fan of marriage and motherhood. What man, bent on sacred or philosophical thoughts, could endure the crying of children, she wrote? And what woman will be able to bear the constant filth and squalor of babies?
So she abandoned her child, and in fact she never even mentioned him by name in her writings. The child was raised by another woman.
Meanwhile, Abelard traveled back to Paris to seek a truce with her uncle. The uncle agreed to forgive the two lovers if they married, and so they married, but in secret. Abelard had great hopes for a career in the church, and for that he needed to remain officially celibate.
Héloïse would have preferred not to get married at all. To her, marriage was a form of prostitution, where women traded sex for financial support. And she saw that true love could only exist when both partners were independent and drawn to each other out of their own will.
Wow, she was way ahead of her time in that kind of thinking. The next time we see anything like that, to my knowledge, is in the 19th century with the free love advocates.
Here's what Héloïse wrote to Abélard about marriage. Quote, "The name of spouse may seem sacred, but at the risk of shocking you, I would have preferred to be called your concubine or even your whore." Unquote.
Fornication, S&M, child abandonment, and now free love. This has been quite a ride.
Stay tuned because there's much more to come after our next musical break. And before that, we'll listen to the 80s pop band Rita Mitsuko and a rollicking song entitled Love Stories Usually Don't End Well.
Valérie, Gilbert partit en voyage, juste au moment de son mariage. Et Hector, alors, Hector est mort en faisant une fugue. Il allait retrouver Gertrude, Simone et Tom s'engueuler dès que 21h sonnait. Yeah! Les histoires d'amour finissent mal en général. Les histoires d'amour finissent mal en général. Les histoires d'amour finissent mal en général. Les histoires d'amour finissent mal en général.
This was Les Histoires d'amour finissent mal en général by the band Rita Mitsuko. Welcome back to KBYS, a McNeese radio station coming to you from Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Before our break, we had gotten to the point where Abelard and Eloise finally got married.
And Eloise did not like the idea of being married, and her husband Abelard wanted to keep quiet about it to pursue a career in the church. So no one knew about their marriage at first. Instead, she lived in a convent where Abelard snuck in regularly so that they could do things in the kitchen.
But her uncle thought that all this sneaking around was a blow to the family honor, so he sent a squad of goons to attack Abelard and castrate him.
Ouch.
After that scandal, everyone in Paris knew that they were an item. Abelard's career plans in the church were in jeopardy.
And to salvage his career, he insisted that she take vows as a nun, while he did the same as a monk.
She had no interest in being a nun, but she complied because she felt guilty for what her uncle had done to Abelard.
And Abelard then moved all the way to Brittany in western France, and he focused on his academic career.
Meanwhile, he arranged for Eloise to become the abbess of a convent in the Champagne region in eastern France, hundreds of miles from him. For years, she heard nothing from him.
That is called sending a message, I think. It's like not texting for a long time. Their relationship revived much later when they began exchanging a series of remarkable letters many years later in 1132. And these are the ones that made their relationship famous for the ages.
In her first letter, she reproached him for his many years of silence, but she also expressed her continued love. She couldn't help but think of him and long for him physically, even during her times of prayer. That broke quite a few taboos about female desire, especially for a woman in her 40s who had taken vows as a nun.
But he was in his 50s by then. He was physically diminished, to say the least, and he was committed to his academic career. So he rejected her professions of love and informed her that as far as he was concerned, he had only ever been interested in her for the sex. And also, as a nun, she was now married to Jesus, not to him, and so she should focus on religious matters.
Ouch. She took the hint, and in her next letters, she discussed theology and asked for his advice on how to run her convent.
He wrote back that the nuns should hire monks to oversee the convent, and in exchange, the nuns would do their cooking and all their sewing for them.
That was not what this independent woman had in mind, so she never wrote him back.
As a theologian, Abelard tried to justify scripture through reason, not just faith. This was a radical idea for the time that anticipated Thomas Aquinas by about 100 years. For that, he was eventually condemned by the church and he had to renounce his views, and after that he died in 1142.
In one final twist, Eloise sent men to steal his body from his grave and bring it back to her so that they could be reunited at long last. She died in 1164.
You can visit their grave, which is now in Paris. It's a frequent pilgrimage place for all the forlorn lovers of the world.
All the way to the end, she remained true to herself, committed to her independence and her love unrepentant.
That reminds me of the great singer Edith Piaf and her song No, I Regret Nothing, which we are going to listen now.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. C'est payé, balayé, oublié. Je me fous du passé. Avec mes souvenirs, j'ai allumé le feu. Mes chagrins, mes plaisirs, je n'ai plus besoin de balayer les amours avec leur trémolo, balayer pour toujours. Je repars à zéro. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Car ma vie, car mes joies, aujourd'hui, ça commence avec toi.
This was Non, Je ne regrette rien, a song recorded by Edith Piaf in 1959.
You are listening to KBYS, the McNeese radio station. Dr. Gerard and I just covered the life of the 12th century writer and poet Eloise.
Merci, and thank you for joining us. This has been Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
This program was funded by a Juliet Hartner grant for Women in the Humanities. For more information on how to help finance fellowships at McNeese State University, contact the foundation at 337-475-5588.
Another sponsor, the History Department at McNeese. If you want to join, please contact the admissions office at McNeese. The number is 337-475-5504.
Or look on the web at mcneese.edu. Goodbye.
Au revoir.